Are you guys alive today? So you guys look really good out there today. You guys online, let me hear a shout out. Like maybe throw up some of those clapping hands, those hands like this, some hearts. Let's give some love here. I'm excited today. As we get started, I want to share with you. I'm standing on a stage in front of several thousand people, and I'm sharing with them the vision that I believe God has given our church to change the world, to actually be part of making a difference in changing the world. And to make it even more exciting, my lifelong mentor and someone I've looked forward to, up to rather, in my entire adult life as learning how to lead as a follower of Jesus, John Maxwell is on the stage with me. If you know anything about me, you know I am like a nut about John Maxwell. In fact, in our house, when I quote John Maxwell, it's considered a swear word with our kids. It's like, oh, yeah, we know John Maxwell says, that's whatever. I mean, that's exciting. That, for me, that would be the dream. The dream of what if we had the opportunity to take what God gave us, this vision of changing the world in our community, and took it beyond the four walls of this building, beyond those of you guys who are watching online, and we were able to take this message of changing the world around the world. That would be the dream. I couldn't imagine doing something like that, but how cool would that be? What's your dream? What's the thing that you could, like, if you could do it, you could hardly stand it, to be able to live in, lean into what God called you to be, what God called you to do? What is your dream? What brings you purpose? Today, we're concluding our series, Reboot, From Stress to Rest, and I believe all 4 weeks up to this point have led up to this moment. Everything we've talked about in this series has led to what I believe is this crucial moment in your life, in my life, and that is, what is God's calling and purpose for your life? When you stare that in the face, it's scary. That's why I call today a frightful adventure, because when you lean into the person that God made you to be, it's scary. I can tell you firsthand of the times that I've had to step out and do something I just wasn't quite sure of. Are they going to make fun of me? Am I going to look like an idiot? Am I going to fail? Am I qualified enough? But you lean into it. It's a frightful adventure if you're faithful to following through. It's not so frightful if you live in your comfort zone, tucked away in your house. And I've heard it said before, do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. That's the way to not have risk in your life, right? But living into your purpose, now that's risky. That's scary. And if there was one word, each week we've talked about resetting, rebooting with one word, one idea. Today's idea is responsibility. Because if you have been given a calling, if God designed you and made you to do something very specific, you have a responsibility to live into that. And I would venture to say, I'd bet money on this because I know how I've been, that all the distractions of life get in the way. And if you're not right now, at least in times in your life, you've been sidetracked from that. You've walked away from that. You are not owning the responsibility to lean in to what God made you to be. But that's what we're going to talk about today. I believe that's where we need a reboot. If purpose raises fear, creates a little bit of anxiety, how in the world could we be talking about this in a series called From Stressed to Rest? I mean, that's kind of not intuitive. That's going the wrong direction. But I believe there's two kinds of stress in life. There's distress. That's the harmful, dysfunctional kind of stress in our life. And then there's eustress. That's the good stressors. It's the kind of thing, I wrote down a list of things that in my life brought anxiety to me, but were so great to live into. Riding my bike for the first time. Like the first time I remember getting on the bike and my dad held onto the back of the seat and then he was sneaky and he let go and he's like, you're riding on your own. I'm like, what? Like how scary to be on that bicycle for the first time, but how exhilarating. The adventure of it. First day of school. Our kids had a little bit of the butterflies this time. It's been a year and a half since, well, actually 2 years since their first day of actual live school, and they started class. It's kind of like there's some butterflies there, but it's good. It's good stress. You look forward to, you lean into those moments. For those of you guys who are married, proposing. Oh, I remember when I proposed to my wife, how stressed I was. I could hardly keep, my fingers were shaking. But would I not do it because it was stressful? No, it was the good kind of stress. I was alive. There was an adventure awaiting ahead. And so I asked her to marry me, and everyone around starts clapping and cheering, and she said, yes, hello, that's cool. Our wedding day, Who wants to be on stage in front of everybody sharing that I'm going to love you till death do us part, and we're up there and they tell you not to lock your knees because you're have all this anxiety and you might pass out. And so you live into these moments with fear, but it's a good fear. And I believe that when you live into the person that God designed you to be, who the purpose that He created you to be, it's a good kind of fear. It's a good kind of stress. It's a good thing to live into. When we're kids, we have no problem with adventure. And as we grow older and older, we become adventure averse, and we stop backing away from it, looking for opportunities to limit and hedge the amount of risk we have in our life, because it's a lot more comfortable and a lot more relaxing to live in the safe area. But it's not fulfilling our purpose. This is costume day. We told all the people wear costume. I wore my costume. This is my weak attempt to be Superman. But I believe we all have a superhero inside of us. You do, I do. It's not Superman. But when we live into the purpose, the calling that God gave each one of us, we become a hero, not of our own story, but of His story. And it's kind of like when you're not living according to the way God made you. It's like a dishwasher. It's really great at washing dishes. It's horrible at transporting me from point A to point B. That's what a car's for. A car is really good at taking me from point A to point B, but a car does not make a good swimsuit for going swimming in. That's what a swimsuit's for. But a swimsuit is not really good at spreading peanut butter and jelly on a sandwich. See, when we don't live into who God made us to be, there's a tension that exists. There's a stress. You want to talk about relieving the stress in your life and going to a place of rest where the only kind of stress you live into is the exhilarating, adventurous, fun kind? Live into your purpose. Live into who God made you to be. I'd like to take you today on a journey. I'd like to take you to a place where you step into your calling that God has placed on your life. You guys heard me say this before. Your career is what you get paid for. Your calling is what you were made for. And what is your calling? What does that look like? Gaining the courage and the confidence to take responsibility today for yourself and your future. So if you're ready, say yes. Oh, you don't sound very convincing. If you're ready, let's go on this journey together. Say yes. Yes. All right. Type it in the chat online. Here we go. Here's the first thing that needs to take place to take responsibility for yourself and your future. In your notes, number 1, determine what needs to happen. You need to determine what needs to happen in your life. What is your what? Who did God create you to be? There's over 7 billion people on the planet. Not one of them is like you. Maybe similar, but not like. And God designed you for a specific purpose that no one else on this planet can fulfill but you. What is your what? What did God call you to be? What's God's calling on your life? Now, I want to point out to you there's 2 types of calling on your life. There's general calling, because God calls all of us to love Him, to bring Him pleasure with our lives, and He calls all of us to love others. That's our general calling. In fact, the last words of Jesus before He left planet Earth, after dying on a cross, being buried, and rising again, He told His disciples what's known as the Great Commission. He said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel and make disciples." That is a calling on every one of our lives. But I want to lean in today, not to we'll assume the general calling is there, but lean into your specific calling. What's your unique expression of that calling in your life? Whatever your calling is, your calling, I was talking to someone this week, your calling is not to retire on a sailboat and just enjoying the good life. It's not to go golfing on the weekends, although those things may be fun. Your calling involves your life pouring out for somebody else. You see, success is what happens to you. Significance is what happens through you. And God never placed you on this planet to waste space and take up air, valuable resources, so that you could waste them on yourself. He gave you everything you have to give away. So your unique calling, it involves giving away what God has given you. What is your unique calling? If we look in our notes, the author Paul in Philippians, he's writing a letter now to the church in ancient Philippi, and he says these words. I love this. In verse 13 of chapter 3, he says, "I focus on this one thing." Not 3 things, not 8 things, this one thing. Do you see his focus? He says, "Forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us." Do you catch that laser-sharp focus? I'm putting everything aside. He likens himself to an athlete. And when you're an athlete and you're competing in an event, everything around you goes away. A couple weeks ago, I was in here teaching, and afterwards, they asked me, where did you hear the students? They were so loud up there. And I'm like, I heard nothing the whole time because I was focused. I was in the moment. And when you're in the moment, living out God's purpose for your life, you are focused, laser focused on His calling, and everything drowns away out in the background, and you see what lies ahead of you, and you go for it. It's what Paul's saying here. As an expert athlete, I focus on that one thing that lies ahead of me, and I go towards that thing. Paul's calling, if you'll read through the New Testament, was to be a missionary to the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people around the area, around the Mediterranean, up all the way up to Spain, all the way down into where Israel is today. And he was very effective, very focused. There was many times he was asked to do something. He says, I'm not going there. I'm not doing that because God is taking me somewhere else. Always tuned into where God was leading him. What is your unique calling? I'll tell you what mine is. I discovered in this last year, doing a lot of soul searching, thinking, praying, and asking God, where do you want to take me? Where do you want to take our church? I've shared this with you before, but I believe very strongly that God has called me to lead our church community in what we call next generation transformation. I believe for the rest of my life, till my dying breath, that I will be a part of leading our church to equipping the next generation to lead cultural transformation as fully devoted followers of Jesus. That is what I focus on. That is the one thing. And part of that expression I feel also, earlier last year, I felt God talking to me. And it's funny. My whole life, I've been a part of church and been connected to God, but I have not heard God speak to me like I have heard Him in the last 2 years. And He told me, He said, Mike, I'm going to use you. I'm going to use Epic Life Church to change the world. And I don't mean that metaphorically, like we're going to make a difference for a few people. I believe, as audacious as it sounds, that God has called our church to be a catalyst for world change. We all know the world needs it. There is so much dysfunction out there, so much pain. God wants to bring people to Himself. He wants to show them His love. I believe for the rest of my life that'll be my calling. And here's the thing, when you discover what your calling is, anything else is a distraction. Anything else, everything else is a distraction. What is your calling? What is it that keeps you awake at night? What do you keep pushing back, you keep ignoring, and it just keeps nagging, it keeps creeping back in that you've been trying to put off? But as you sit there right now and I talk to you and I look at you and say, you have a unique calling and purpose, what is causing your palms to get sweaty? What is causing your heart rate to go up? Are you shifting your seat a little bit? Are you a little bit uncomfortable right now talking about that because you know back in your mind you've been pushing it aside, but God wants to use you for something. He wants you to lean into it. You might be an investor. God can use that. You might be a salesperson. God can use that. You might be an artist, a writer. You might be good with numbers. I'm a numbers geek. Anybody out there a numbers geek? Own it. Be proud. Someone's like, ah. I knew a guy, we called him Spreadsheet. Like he lived by spreadsheets. I love that. It makes me smile. It makes my heart glad. And the funny thing is, I'm not a type A person, but I love that kind of organization. But God can use that. God can use servant-minded people. He can use people who have the gift of hospitality. He can use people who are observant, because that is not me. My wife gets used all the time to help you guys not deal with the mess that I make, because I see the big picture, but I don't see the details. There's people that God can use that are observant, see stuff that other people don't. You could be a team builder, a problem solver. You might be good with your hands. I don't care what it is. God will use it. And nothing that you have was given to you by accident. God wants to use your gifts, your resources, your personality, your skills to fulfill your calling, His calling in your life. And the question I have for you right now is, what is it that you are deeply convicted is your calling? You know, we have things that we strongly believe. You might have like a political view that you're willing to argue for, but here's the thing. Between belief and conviction, belief is something you will argue about. A conviction is something you will die for. What are you convicted that God has called you to live out in your life? And if you're not convicted, you will never see it through, because it is too hard and it'll beat you up too much, and you will not stay the course if you are not deeply convicted that God has called you to that. So you need to find that inside of you. What is God working on in your heart? Louisa May Alcott says strong conviction precedes great outcomes. So first, determine what needs to happen. Here's the second thing. Once you know what needs to happen, number 2, ditch the excuses. Ditch the excuses. We all have them. We're all experts at excuses. We are so good at deceiving ourselves and deceiving other people into thinking that what we do or not do when we should be doing something else is justified. We're great at that. See, we make decisions with our emotions and then we find logic to back them up. We are so good at the excuse game. We don't need to learn that one. What we need to learn to do is face reality and face the facts of the situation. And here's the thing. We tend to make our situations complicated because complicated makes it easier to explain them away with excuses. But when it's simple, not so easy to do that, is it? That's why one of our values at Epic Life Church is to keep it simple. The simpler it is, the less ambiguous it can be, the more clear it becomes, and we can move forward in what we think is the right thing to do. What is standing in the way of what God wants to do through you today? What obstacle? What thing are you afraid to say yes to? What thing are you afraid to say no to? What stands in your way? See, the thing is if we live into the person God made us to be, we got to be true. We got to get rid of the excuses, and we got to move forward in spite of that fact. For every excuse we give, we are abdicating responsibility for ourselves and for our future. We put ourselves in the position of the victim. And everything that happens to us, not for us. But here's the thing, life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you. Every good and every bad thing in your life can be used for good. Stop making excuses. Live into the person that God made you to be. If you're following along your Bibles, you brought it today. If you're online, you can click on the Bible tab. I want to open to the book of Exodus, way back, second book in the Bible. Exodus chapter 3. And while you're finding that, I'll tell you, there's a guy in the Bible we all know by the name of Moses. Moses was played by Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, the parting of the Red Sea. Moses of that fame. Moses didn't start there. Moses had a lot of excuses. In fact, I want to read to you from Exodus chapter 3, starting in verse 1. This just is funny to me. One day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. This is where it gets strange. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't the bush burning up? I must go see it. Verse 4, when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses, here I am, Moses replied. Now, I'm gonna leave off there for a second. If that doesn't strike you as crazy and whack right there, I don't know. You walk up to a bush in the woods and it's burning, but it's not burning up. And as you get closer, a voice speaks to you and says, it's the Lord. If that was me, I'd be a little freaked out at that moment. But at the same time, I would have no trouble believing that there is a God and that He's all powerful. Here He is sitting in this bush and it's not burning up. I'm like, okay, God, whatever you say goes, right? No, wrong. With Moses, God tells him what He wants him to do. He's 80 years old. God says, I want to start working in your life now. Before parting of the Red Sea fame, you're 80 years old. I want you to start right now. What I want you to do is I want you to go to the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and I want you to tell him, let my people go. I got to admit, if I was Moses, it'd be a little bit scary. If you read through Exodus chapter 3, at least in the New Living Translation, 3 times it says, but Moses protested. Can you imagine protesting God speaking to you in a bush, tangibly? But no, God, I can't. If God says it, I don't care how scared I am, I'm doing that, right? But Moses protests God. Now we pick up in our notes to Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. After 3 times saying, but Moses protested, look what it says in verse 10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "O Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now, even though you have spoken to me. I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." He's already making excuses to the God of the universe who's speaking to him tangibly in a verse. You can catch the irritation, I think, maybe a little bit impatience with God. Verse 11, then the Lord asked Moses, who made a person's mouth? Who decided whether people speak or do not speak? Hear or do not hear? See or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? There a little bit of irritation there, maybe a little lack of patience because Moses isn't getting into this thing is hope, is what God hoped would happen. But then I love the confidence he leaves off with Moses. He says, now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you what to say. Have you ever been Moses in your life? We can't be too hard on him because There's things in our life that are a lot less complicated, a lot less challenging than going to the ruler of a nation and telling him to let your 2 million people free of their slavery. Anybody want to try that one on? But we have excuses for everything. You got to ditch the excuses. You know, back in the spring of last year, we did this thing called Change Your World. My mentor, John Maxwell, wrote a book called Change Your World. And I thought, man, that is a message we need to hear today. So I wanted to do a teaching series, but I thought it's just not enough to be a teaching series. We have to be more connected than that. And so we put together these thing called Change Your World kits. And in order to, we had inside there, we actually put the book that John Maxwell wrote. I thought everyone needs to read this book. We've got to get this message in the hands of every person we can. So we put a book in each one of these kits, but that can get really expensive. And so I did this bizarre thing. I called up the John Maxwell Company out of the blue one day, about this time last year. It's like, hey, I got this idea. Maybe, for churches, you could make some resources for us, and we could do them, get us a message series and all this stuff. I told the guy they connected me. His name was Jason. I told him, I said, selfishly, I want this because it seems like a lot of hard work, and I don't want to do it. I was hoping you guys would make the resources so I don't have to. He thought it was a great idea. Took it back to his team. It didn't happen. But he sent me an early edition, a reader's copy of the book. I got this right here that I got 4 months before the series released, so I could start going to work on thinking through how are we going to convey this idea of change in the world, and how can we tie this in? And I thought, I got to get this book into each one of these kits so everyone else gets a chance to read this too. So I called Jason back up. Hey, Jason, it's Mike again. I was wondering if I could get a good deal on 150 books, And so I called him up and talked it through, and he did. He gave us a deal for the books, and so we put one of those books in each one of these kits. If you were part of Change Your World, it was fun to be able to engage every week and connect with the ideas, the concept of this idea that each one of us has the power inside of us to be a part of the change that we need so desperately in the world. Because I'm a John Maxwell nut, because I'm a new pastor, I thought, I need some leadership experience. And I heard John was doing this conference in Orlando, Florida, back here in August. And so I signed up to go to the conference. And if you'll know, the day I was leaving, it was a Sunday. And originally when I had planned to fly out on a Sunday, we were doing online services. So I didn't have a big crunch to get on my flight. But I had to move my flight so I could leave right after the service to be able to get there in time for this conference. And so I was scrambling out the door at the end of the service the day I had to leave. And a last-minute thought, I thought, I should bring one of these kits and show Jason what he helped us put together. That would be so cool. And I had a carry-on bag. That was what I brought, a carry-on bag and an overnight bag. And I was actually driving out of the parking lot, and I zipped back, and I'm going to go grab one. I grabbed a kit and just threw it in the trunk. I had like an hour and a half to get on my plane when I left here. And I showed up at the airport in the long-term parking with just about an hour, maybe a little more than an hour, to get on my flight. Like the gate is departing. If you know me, I'm a last-minute guy. That's where I feel best. But I opened up the trunk, and here's this kit, and here's my bag, and I thought, do I have time to rearrange my bag to fit this in? I thought, sure, let's give it a shot. So I shuffled things around in the trunk of my car and put the kit in. I got on the plane just in time. Everything was great. Showed up at the conference, and I thought, I don't know if Jason's even going to be there, but if he's here, I want to find him. Well, the first day of the conference, they actually said, hey, if you need questions answered, talk to Jason. I'm like, there he is. So I found the guy, went over to him and said, I got this kit back in my hotel room. Would you like to see it? And he said, yeah, it'd be awesome. So next day, I brought this kit, and I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious, a little awkward. If you see the book, this is their branding, and we changed the graphic, and I'm like a little bit like, dude, I'm sorry. We kind of changed your branding and all that. And I showed the kit to Jason, and he was beside himself. He's like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Thank you so much for bringing that. I gave him the kit. In fact, I think I even have a picture. This is a picture of me and Jason at the conference. Wonderful guy. We became fast friends on this 3-day conference that I was a part of. Great guy. But here's the thing. If I had taken the risk to put the kit in my bag and to fly this kit, it took like 40% of my luggage up across the country. Like, how silly, how stupid. Why? I could have just told him about it, but I'm like, he's got to see this. He's got to see it for himself. It's so different seeing it than hearing about it. And I show up at the conference, and I was almost like not going to ask him if he wanted to see the kit. I'm like, this is weird. He's going to think I'm like weird that I brought this kit and it's in my hotel room. But I showed him anyways. And now look what happens. He sees this kit. He thought it was awesome, but that would have never have happened if I hadn't ditched the excuses in that situation. You need to ditch the excuses. All they do is render you powerless in your current situation, powerless over yourself and your future. If you've done that successfully, it prepares you for what comes next in your notes. Number 3, you need to exercise a bias towards action. Exercise a bias towards action. Every successful person I know has a bias toward action. And I'll be in full disclosure, I suffer from not pulling the trigger soon enough because I'm like the analyzer and I want to analyze every angle. We go shopping and like I'm looking back and forth and the pros and cons and the price, can I get it? And so I'm like spending so much time that by the time I'm ready to buy it, it's already sold out and I can't, it's too late. I don't know if you're like that, but I'm like my kind of thing is ready, aim, 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 aim. Like I'm stuck in aim mode. But the most successful people know they're not irrational, careless, shoot from the hip kind of people. They're not like ready, fire, but they do it correctly. Ready, aim, fire. And if you want to be successful, if you want to live out God's calling for your life, you have to have a bias for action. You can't sit around like totally beating to death in your mind all the pros and cons and should I do it? Is it the right time? Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger without knowing all the facts and not knowing how the final outcome is going to be. You've got to trust God. We've got to be willing to step forward when it's time. I got this June here sitting in the front row, gave me this week, and I thought this is so good. We all tend to wait around. We have these excuses, and then we think someone else is going to step forward and do it. Someone else will take the reins. Someone else will be the one that will do this piece here. She sent me this, and I thought this is so beautiful, June. Once upon a time, there were 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it. Nobody did it. Somebody was angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody didn't do it. It ended up by everybody blaming somebody when actually nobody could accuse anybody. I think we play that game all too often, waiting around, trying to figure out if it's the right time. Should I step forward? Should someone else do it in this moment? I don't know. We all wait for someone else to do something, but that person is not coming because that person is you. You are the hero to your story. You are the hero to God's story if you'll let Him use you. Most of us just need 20 seconds of courage. I love that line from the movie We Bought a Zoo. It just takes 20 seconds of courage. Did you know, you think about this in your life, the times where you didn't do something because you're worried about the outcome of it, you actually were in more pain thinking about what could happen than if you actually had just done it and lived through the experience. I heard a Navy SEAL talking, actually it's in a book I read, he talked about the fact that when they were on the beach, the first day of Hell Week for Navy SEAL training, 221 officers in this program for his class, and they stood on the beach with their lifeboats over their head, and they were standing at attention, and the instructor said, well, boys, they're right at the beach line. Look at the sun. It's going down now. Enjoy the sunset because this is going to be the longest night of your life. And then they walked away and left them standing there looking at the sun going down. He said more people quit in that moment than any other time during Hell Week. They were put through the ringer. But where they quit was the prospect of what might happen. And that's where we normally quit, is when we put ourselves in so much pain and turmoil about what could or might possibly happen, that if we just bore through it and lived through the moment and did what was going to be hard to do, it probably wouldn't even be as bad as our thoughts before the time. We just need 20 seconds of courage to go into it. I'll go back to my story with Jason at the John Maxwell conference. I showed Jason the kit, and if I hadn't taken action on it, the next thing would not have happened. See, Jason looked at the kit, and he's like, this is amazing. He's like, Mark, which is John's co-owner and CEO of his companies. Mark and John have to see this kit. We've got to take you to them and let you see this today. All day long, waiting for an opportunity. Jason was off. I didn't hear anything. And then one day he had this eye. He looked at me. He's like, right now. Now, John, if you understand, John is super, super important. John Maxwell was asked by the Pope to come train the Vatican on leadership. John Maxwell has been invited into 30-something countries, and the leaders of the countries, prime ministers, presidents, kings, have invited him into the country to be able to train their people on good, solid leadership and godly values. When COVID hit and things started shutting down, he had Fortune 100 company owners, CEOs calling him up, asking him for advice. He had presidents calling him for advice. That's how important he is. And every time there's a break, there's 50 to 100 people in front of him and Mark wanting to talk to him. And so Jason waits till Mark, the next session starts, and Mark walks out the back and says, follow me. We go out in the back. And I got my opportunity to show Mark this kit. While I'm showing him, he's just like, his eyes are getting so big, and he's like, this is amazing. This is so cool. While we're talking, there's a lady from Memphis, Tennessee, little sassy lady, walks up behind us, and she goes, excuse me, I've been eavesdropping. I'm from a church of 5,000 people, and we would buy that kit from you. I'm like, and Mark just kind of laughs. He's like, I get it, I know. He turns to Jason, he says, John has to see this kit. He's signing autographs after this next session. We got to get Mike over to see him. So I stood, waited for about a half hour as he had a line of 200 people coming through to get autographs. And then Jason, who was supposed to introduce me, had to walk away for a second. All of a sudden, I make eye contact with Mark. I'm like, I grab the kit, I walk up, and I'm like shaking. I mean, this is John Maxwell. If there's anybody in the world I'd like to meet, it's John Maxwell. And I'm walking, I can feel my legs shaking. Hi, John. And all Mark says, he walks, he goes, John, this is Pastor Mike from Portland. Mike, show him what you showed me. And Jason had warned me before going up. He's like, he's very busy. He's got a lot going on. You have to honor his time. He said, you go up there, be very quick, show him maybe one or two of the boxes, and then, be brief. I'm like, okay, I got that. So I showed John, told him what we built the kit, why we built it, pulled it up, and I opened up the first box and showed him. And John, sitting in his chair, he just goes he pulls his whole leadership team over. He says, guys, this is what I'm talking about. This is how we get the message out about changing the world. We have to do it like this. You guys, I go and show him the second box. And I get to the third, I'm like, I don't know how many boxes you want me to show you. And John's like, I want you to show me every single one of them. And I spent 15 minutes with my lifelong idol and hero, John Maxwell, showing him the contents of this box. My friends, you have to be willing to step into what God has called you to. And nothing I did was extraordinary. It wasn't like I'm Braveheart. I'm like, let's take the, I'm going into a battle. I just had to be faithful with a few simple things that seemed a little awkward, a little uncomfortable, and live into the moment that God has called me to. Every one of us has those. It's not that hard. You just have to say yes every time God asks you. You have to lean into the moment. I kind of think of it like this. You guys all had a rubber band on your seat. You guys, when you came in, you're probably like, what is this? I want to show you guys something. I got this I love these little laser cut wood toys. And this one in particular is like a clock. It's like a little countdown clock. And it's powered by rubber bands. But here's the interesting thing. It is lifeless when the rubber band doesn't have enough tension on it. But as I wind this thing up, let's see if I can figure out how to do this thing without breaking the rubber band here. I'll wind this thing up a little bit, see if we can put a little tension on the rubber band. Watch what happens. It comes to life. And in your life, you're a rubber band. And it's certainly relaxing and comfortable to live like this, but this is never the way you were intended to live. God did not design you to function like this, but rather like this. This can be uncomfortable sometimes. It's certainly effective. You think about your life, and when God is stretching you, that is when you're at your best. God designed us as human beings to be at our best when we are out of our comfort zone. We can have moments of rest in our comfort zone, relaxing, vacation, Sabbath, those kind of things, but we live with our life stretched for Him. And that is where the life comes from, is when we live into the tension in our life. Brendan Burchard says, doubt increases with inaction. Clarity reveals itself in momentum. Growth comes with progress. For all those reasons, begin. I'll ask you again, what is your what? What is it that you're scared to death to lean into because you just don't know what's going to happen if you do? Lean into the tension. The words of James in the New Testament, I believe, are pretty tough. He says this, and it's very bluntly. Remember, it is a sin to know that what you ought to do and then not to do it. Do you hear that? God has called you to something, and your inaction is sin. You're not living the way He intended for you to live. You have to lean into the tension. You have to lean into the risk. You have to lean into the adventure. Because then and only then are we actually living the way God wants us to, and rather than sinning against God. There's another scripture, Proverbs 14:2. It's not in your notes. It says, those who follow the right path fear the Lord. Those who take the wrong path despise Him. What do you want to do, the right path or the wrong path? Once you've taken action, here's the fourth and final step that you need to do. And that is number 4, is remain steadfast. Guys, this is so crucial because it's easy. I can get you all pumped up today. Oh, yeah, let's go do it. I told my wife, I said, what I want to do is put a water gun in everybody's seat and say, all right, let's go charge hell with a water gun today. Like you can leave here going, ah! And then you go out in life and all the hype is gone and life beats you up. But you can't forget what we talked about today. You have to lean into the tension. You have to remain steadfast. Don't expect overnight results. If they come, celebrate it. Every once in a while, there's one of those beautiful moments where one little thing happens and all of a sudden the sky opens. Like my experience going to, meet John Maxwell. How cool would that be if everything we did had immediate reaction like that? But it doesn't work that way. It takes time. You have to remain steadfast. Here's 3 words for you. They're not sexy. Repetition, discipline, consistency. They're not sexy, but if you employ them daily, they will produce amazing dividends in your life. It's not sexy living your life for God, the daily grind, day in and day out, being faithful to who God has called you to be, but it's certainly effective if you stay the course for the length of your life. There is a harvest if you keep planting seeds. In fact, Galatians 6:9, not in your notes, says this, so let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Joy may last for a night, or sorrow may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. We heard us talk about this song, Do It Again, we sung earlier. It says, I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. God is going to do something in your life. I promise you. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. You just have to be faithful to leaning into what He's called you to do. I think of this, probably the easiest illustration. If you're a parent, you'll get this. If you're not, you'll probably kind of relate. Kids. Oh my goodness. You have like a 4-year-old kid, and how many times have you told them to do something or not to do something? Clean up your room. We go potty in the toilet. There's all these things that we are training our kids on, and my wife, I can't tell you how many times my wife and I, we looked at each other in private, we're like, is it ever going to get better? I mean, it seems like forever all this training, and like how many times that we talk to our kids about pride and not lying and not being mean to your sister and not being selfish, and it seems like we're broken records over and over and over and over, and it seems like there's never going to be any progress, and if it is, it's so small. Now, if you're a parent of a young child, let me give you a little hope. My kids are now teenagers, 14 and 17 years old, and man, are they growing in character in leaps and bounds. I can see it almost daily. The amount of growth in them because we remained steadfast. We stayed the course. We did what we felt called to do. I heard of this variety of Chinese bamboo. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. You plant it under the ground, and for 5 years, you won't see it. The roots are gaining strength and stability under the ground for 5 years. First year, you won't see a sprout. Second year, third, fourth year. Finally, on the 5th year, a sprout will come up. And here's the interesting thing about this variety of bamboo. It'll grow 90 feet in 30 days. They've clocked it. World record, clocked it. This bamboo grew like 3 feet in a 24-hour period of time. They clocked it to 1 inch every 40 minutes. You can literally look at it without time lapse and watching it grow. There are many things in your life that God is cultivating below the surface, and you don't know what's going to come of them, but you stay faithful. You remain steadfast. The time will come. God will use you, I promise you. When you're worn out, when you're ready to quit, when you're ready to throw in the towel, remember this. If you need something to cling to, some motivation to take you through the next day, the hard work of going through what you're supposed to do, remember this. Do what you were called to do to honor those you love. Because the people who are going to miss out the most if you don't do what you were called to do are the people closest to you. And if you want to talk about honoring those who you love, first and foremost, God. If you want to honor God, do what you're supposed to do. Do what you're called to do. Just one more day. Don't worry about the future and the long, what's going on in front of you. Jesus said in Matthew 6:34, He says, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. Just focus on right now. Just focus on getting through the next hard thing. One day at a time. Look what Paul writes in your notes there, 1 Corinthians 15:58. So my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Underline strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord. Underline always. Be strong and immovable always. For you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. That's our verse to remember today. I encourage you to commit that verse to memory. There's a certain power, a feeling of liberation that comes, a peace in your life when you step into God's unique call on your life. When you do the thing that makes sense because it's the way God designed for you to be. If you're listening right now and you know what your call is, if you're right now feeling a little bit uncomfortable, your palms are sweaty, your heart rate is up, I'm there too. Because I don't know what's coming next. I know there will be some crazy things that are in store. But I do know this, that God's in control of the situation. Let this be an encouragement to you if you're feeling not bold enough to step out into what God calls you to this week. I heard this poem by Marianne Williamson. So good. I want to share it with you now. She says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. You see, it's the light and not the darkness that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God inside of us. Not in some of us, but in every one. And every time you let your light shine, you unconsciously give people permission to do the same. You see, when we are liberated by our own fear, our very presence automatically liberates others. I want you to think about that. Let that sit in your mind right now for a moment. What is it that you're afraid to live into, to lean into in your life? And God is calling you to let your light shine, but you're too scared to do it. We have all the excuses. I'm not old enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not rich enough. What's your not enough in your life? The excuse that you're hanging on to, that you aren't willing to let go of. I want you to lean into that. I'm wearing my Superman shirt today. It's interesting when I think about Superman. He has like this alter ego, like this thing, his disguise. I don't know how the glasses do it, but apparently wearing another shirt and the glasses makes him unrecognizable to anybody else. Superman, who is he? He's Clark Kent. And he does that to hide his true identity, to protect him for when he's needed most. But you know what? A lot of times in our life, what we do, we put on the Clark Kent glasses, and then we become content with being Clark Kent. And when other situations arise where we're needed to be Superman, to be the hero in the situation, we're like, no, shh, I'm Clark Kent. And we start to think this is who we are, not this. But we need to take the glasses off. We need to pull off the shirt, get the cape out, and realize that God has called each one of us to be heroes. I want to re-emphasize for you, this doesn't mean that everything you do has to be huge. You're not going to go and tell the emperor of a country that you want him to release 2 million of his people to you. But there are things every day that you do, courageous things, brave things, that will change the world. This last week I was in Subway, and I every day I try to think of how can I add value to the people that I interact with. And I'm not always good at this, but I was in this moment in line waiting to give my order to the sandwich artist. And I look down the hallway, and there's a young lady she's got a Subway shirt on, and she's bent down over one of the doorknobs for the bathroom, and it's broken, and she's trying to put it back on. And I watched her for a minute, just kind of not thinking anything of it. I'm looking at her do her job, and I'm waiting for my sandwich artist to get ready for me. And I thought to myself, a little thought crossed in my mind. I said, what if you went over and saw if you could help her? Looks like she could use a set of hands to hold it while she's trying to screw that thing on. I thought to myself, you have these conversations. I'm like, no, that'd be kind of weird. How awkward would that be? I don't even know how she feels about COVID. I might be getting too close, invading her bubble. That's just a little bit weird. I'm going to infringe on her job. I'm going to make her feel like I don't think she's capable of doing this. Like all these things are like, God's like, Mike, would you stop the excuses and just go over there and help her? And so I get out of line. I walk over and I say, excuse me, do you need any help with that? And she's like, oh, yeah, it was broken. I took it off to see if I could fix it. Now I can't get the thing back on. And I'm like, well, can I hold it while you try to align the screws? She said, oh, that'd be great. Thank you. And it was awkward for a moment. And we were trying to figure out how to get to work as a team. And I'm pulling my phone out and trying to shine a flashlight so she can see where the screw is. And we weren't getting a lot of progress at first. And then we finally lined it up. Success. We got the screw and put it on until I looked down and realized it's one of those latch knobs and it's the wrong direction, blocking the way for the door to close. So I broke the news to her. We did it wrong. She's like, well, I'm not a handyman, or as you can tell, it's not my thing. I said, well, I am, and look at what I did. So we pulled it off, got it back on pretty quick. We kind of got in our groove after a minute. It only took us about a minute to get it off and back on, but after about 5 minutes, we got it down, turned off. I turned around, and the people who were behind me had already gone through and left the restaurant. I thought, well, I just, lost 5 minutes of my very busy day. And I stand in line, I go through. About the time I get to where they ask what sauces and seasonings I want, she comes back around the other side, and she's now able to help in the kitchen. And it's time to check out the order, and I didn't realize how much of an impact I made on her until we go to take the order, and she says, nope, this one's on us. She's like, that was amazing. She turns to her coworker, starts bragging on me for helping her put on a doorknob. It wasn't a big deal. And I said, no, that's not why I did it. I just want to add value. And she said, well, at the very least, let me give you my employee discount. I didn't argue with her. I wanted her to have an opportunity to pay back the kindness, but I thought to myself, as I was preparing this message, there was a moment where I allowed my light to shine, and I unconsciously gave her permission to shine her light. I don't know how that changed the rest of her day, her view of people. Maybe she's skeptical because everyone comes in rude or just getting their sandwich and go. Every day, small decisions. Be brave. Be focused. Don't miss the opportunities that God wants to use you for. I have a confession to make to you. The John Maxwell story I told you, that's not the end of the story. You see, when I got done showing John all the boxes, he turns to Mark, his CEO, and he says, Mark, we have to get Mike on the stage tomorrow with me to show everybody this. So I proceed the next day to go up on stage with John Maxwell. I want to show you a quick snippet of that conversation. Watch this.
Jason, do you have the Pastor Mike with you? So let's give him a hand, okay? Good to have you, okay? But one of the things I really liked, can they get this close? Can they get it up close? Yeah, you can. One of the things I loved about how he did this kit is I love the way the word "your" is in here. It makes it very personal. Change your world. But I just think that was very great.
And I'm gonna let Pastor Mike share just very briefly what he did and cover just a couple of these really unique boxes.
Take it away, Mike.
Guys, I share that with you because I want you to gain courage. I didn't know, 24 hours before that, I had no clue that this was going to happen. But remain faithful who God called you to be. I ended up spending over 10 minutes on stage with John Maxwell, sharing his stage with his audience of 3,400 people from around the world. Now, it's interesting, back when we finished Change Your World back in May of this year, we got done, and a lot of you guys were part of that, and you were very excited, like me, about what God is going to do through our church. And I had people coming up to me like, Mike, what's the next step? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just going to wait, pray, and wait on God. All summer long, that was my response, and it got to the place where the fire starting to get cool, and I'm like, God, what's going to happen with this? And we're going to change the world. It's like you start to not believe it anymore. At this conference, I got a chance to get on stage. I told you I believe that God has called our church to be a catalyst for world change. Let me tell you what happened when I got on stage at this conference. There were over 200 pastors in attendance. When I got off stage, it took me 1.5 hours to get out of the room because people just kept coming up. Tell me more. I need to know more about that. I got people in different countries. I got someone in Mexico who is going to translate everything we did in Spanish. I have churches on standby right now waiting because they want to do this in their church as well. I don't know the end of the story. I don't know how it ends. But I do know that I will remain faithful to whatever God has called me to do. I started this series out by telling you there was a moment a couple months ago where I was kind of inventorying the last year and a half and all that. It's been tough. Let's just admit it. It's been tough. There's been a lot of challenges. Perhaps for a lot of us, it's been the hardest season of our life. And I was going through just kind of inventorying all those things. And I told you this, that God showed up in that moment, and he said to me, Mike, so what? So what? So what if it's been hard? So what if it continues to be hard or even gets harder? So what if it's challenging, if it's over your head, if it's more than you can handle? I'm in over my head. I don't know anything that I'm doing when it comes to what we're doing here. I'm just taking it a day at a time, figuring out what the next best step is for me and for our church. God said to me, he said, so what? But I'll tell you this, it wasn't a condescending so what or I don't care so what. It was a loving so what. And I didn't tell you the end of the sentence. He said, so what are you going to do about it? I ask you the same question today. What is God's calling on your life? What is God calling you to lean into? I know it's been hard this year. I know we're all juggling so many plates. We're so busy. We can't even get enough sleep at night. We're burning out. We're depressed. We're discouraged. We're high on anxiety. So what are you going to do about it? Anything that is not your calling is a distraction. You need to take a hard look at your life, what God has called you to do. Remove the distractions and lean into who God wants you to be. That is God's calling and plan for your life. John Maxwell, again, my mentor, you're going to hear me say it a lot. He says you can't moan and lead at the same time. I believe that God has called us to lead a revolution, a movement. But we can't moan if we hope to ever want to lead through this. One day at a time, one step at a time, one decision at a time. It's what God has called us to. If you're sitting there thinking to yourself, man, I kind of know my calling, or maybe you don't even know what your calling is yet, and you're like, I don't know what the next step is. What do I do next? That's okay, because I got one for you. In your notes, on your connection card on the back page, next step number 2 is the one I want to focus on more than any other thing today is this. It says, sign me up for the Change Your World rally on November 21st. Guys, we're doing a rally on November 21st that is something like you've never seen before or have ever experienced at our church. We're going to come together. We're going to celebrate. We're going to talk vision. I'm going to reveal and unpack for you guys some things that I just don't have time on a Sunday morning that you've never heard that I believe God is calling our church to. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to step in, to take action, to find out what your what is and to move forward on it. Back in January, if you were tuned in, if you were a part of our church back in January, I unpacked our vision that I shared with you earlier. We exist to equip the next generation to lead cultural transformation as fully devoted followers of Jesus. And I asked that day, if you remember, I told those who were present on that service that day, I said, if you are all in and you're saying blank check, whatever you're calling us to, I'm in. I want you to sign your name. And I gave a little commitment form. That day, 52 people signed that form. And I told everyone that day, I said, if you don't sign today, the train is leaving the station. You will miss out on this opportunity. But I also said, but don't worry, the train will stop off at another station later on. There will be an opportunity to get on then. And I was at that time like going, all aboard, everyone get on the train, we're leaving. Hey, stop, come on, let's go. Let's get on the train. It's time to go. Folks, the train is at the station right now. It's not going to be here much longer. And I'll tell you what I told you then. There will be other opportunities to jump on if this is not the right season or time for you. But you know what I'm doing today? All aboard? Okay, come on. All aboard? I'm not going to try and guilt you. I'm not going to try and compel you to get on the train. I just offer you the opportunity. And if you want to be a part of the God-sized vision that God has for Epic Life Church, to lean in like me, scared to death like me, into leading the next generation to cultural transformation as fully devoted followers of Jesus to literally change the world, then you better sign up for this event. Because this is, if you're in a race, this is where the gun is firing. This is in a groundbreaking ribbon ceremony. We are going to cut the ribbon at this night. And at this point in time, our sleeves are going up and we are getting in action. And we are going to change the world. So please sign up for that today if that's you. As we wrap up today, I mentioned that every decision we make has an impact on our life. I'll tell you that the next decision you make may change your life. And that could be no truer than if you're someone who's here today and you've never made a decision to follow Jesus with your life, the best decision you can make, and I guarantee will radically change the rest of your life, is to follow him today, to say yes to Jesus. If you're online and you're tuned in, and what we talked about today has spoken to your heart, say yes to Jesus today. If you do that today, I promise you it'll be scary, exciting, adventurous, risky, and all of the above mixed in together. But it'll be the best decision you've ever made, and it will change your life forever. I'm going to say a prayer in a moment. As I say that prayer, I invite you to say it along with me. If you're someone who's saying today, I want to make a decision to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. I surrender to him. I don't have it all figured out. I don't know all the answers, but I'm trusting, and I'm going to step out and just do that next thing that he's called me to. If that's you today, while I say this prayer, would you say it in your own heart? Everyone bow with me as we pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for saving me. I believe in you, your life, your death on the cross, and your resurrection. Forgive me of my sins. Fill me with your Spirit. Lead me and teach me to follow you. I ask this in your name. Amen. If that's you, I invite you to go on that journey with me. And if someone here has already made that decision and you want to lean into your calling, guys, be bold this week. Do everything God calls you to. There are things today that you can lean into, and I encourage you to take courage. Jessica.